Right, perfect. So first off, I just wanted to welcome everybody to our presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. My name is Ashley Mockley, and I am the Associate Director for Student Success and Advising with Boise State Online. And my team and I have partnered with the Advising and Academic Support Center to offer this webinar on how to be a successful online student. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our academic development and recovery team and our AASC team for introductions, and then we'll jump right into the presentation.
Thanks, Ashley. Quick introduction. My name is Lindsay Cassidy. I'm Assistant Director for Academic Development and Recovery within the Advising and Academic Support Center.
Go ahead, Nico.
My name is Nico Diaz. I'm one of the Academic Development and Recovery Advisors at the AASC.
And my name is Matt Schmazzo. I'm the Associate Director for our Academic Support Programs with AASC.
All right, so I get the honor of getting us started. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, Ashley. When we talk about school, and this doesn't necessarily apply to online students exclusively, but when we talk about school, we say start with your why. And what we mean by that is, what is the reason that you or any student is here in school? Generally, we hear the more traditional answers. Oh, my parents wanted me to come here, or I want to get a better job, or I just want to see what opportunities are available for me after I get my degree. But we actually encourage for all students to think about a little bit deeper about what their purpose beyond their degree is when it comes to studying. So if we can go to the next slide, we're going to introduce the idea of Simon Sinek's Golden Circle. If you're not familiar with him, Simon Sinek is a very engaging speaker. I recommend that you look him up if you're interested. But he discusses the idea of the Golden Circle, or starting with the why. He brings up a very business-driven examples for it, but he applies very well to the individual level too. When students tend to start from the outside of that circle on the left, the what, that tends to be the college degree, the diploma at the end of the journey. But it is very difficult to identify or motivate yourself when we're always focusing on that outside rim of the circle. So when we dig deeper, when we look at the why, the purpose behind it, why do we want to look at more opportunities in the labor force? Why do we want to pursue a degree that we're passionate about? Why do we want to invest time, effort, and a lot of money to earn this degree? It can shape the way that we evaluate our effort. So using this golden circle, starting with the why, is a good way to frame your actions. And that can definitely apply as you progress through your college experience. If we go to the next slide, we have a very short quote by Chris Bailey. It says, activities that are connected with your deepest held values will lead you to be happier and more motivated. And activities that are primary to your work will let you become more productive in the same amount of time. Now, Chris Bailey is a blogger that focuses a lot on productivity, a very interesting person. But again, he's tying the idea of motivation with productivity. And that's what we're getting at when we talk about starting with the why. Recognizing the values that you uphold and the purpose behind it can actually lead to motivation. So when we see, if you go to the next slide, we see this progression of steps that we hope that students can identify as they progress through their experience. You start with the why, recognize what's important in your life, the reason why you're here. And that can traditionally transition into goal setting. What are the specific goals that you want to identify? And those can be goals in the very short term, maybe for the next week or month, to the semester, to potentially the next 4 or 5 years that you might be in school. And ultimately, that's going to build the motivation behind it to keep up with your actions, but also recognize your progress. The one thing about college is that usually we don't see that benefit or the reward until the end of the journey when you get your degree. But actually recognizing different stepping stones that you can identify as you make progress can definitely keep you engaged and keep you motivated moving forward. Now, one of the things that we encourage students to consider are what we refer to as SMART goals. What are specific goals that you want to identify, and make them as specific as possible. Make sure they are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. That's a little acronym for SMART that I'm sure that all of us have heard at some point in time. But in order to imagine any kind of progress, we need to be able to imagine a different kind of reality. And then we need to be able to believe that that reality is possible. And that's the purpose behind this framework that we are introducing. And then the last thing that I'm going to touch on, and if we can go to the next slide, is the idea of mindset. That is a paradigm established by Carol Dweck. She is a psychologist very much ingrained in this type of work. And she identifies that two different types of mindsets, particularly when it comes to education. We have what she calls a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. They tend to be fairly opposite, and you can see it on the little infographic in front of you. But ultimately, she talks about the importance of a growth mindset and being able to recognize how, with time and effort, we can develop different sets of skills and information and talents. So things, pretty much she identifies that we have a lot of control in the way that we take advantage of our education. That being said, we have a little asterisk there on the left side that her idea of fixed versus growth mindset definitely doesn't take into consideration a lot of social or environmental factors that can impact one's education. So we need to take it with a grain of salt. That being said, it's always important to recognize what are the things under our control that we can put into place, particularly when it relates to our education. With that somewhat brief introduction, I do want to pass the reins to Lindsay. She's going to be discussing time management in regards to online schooling.
Thank you, Nico. Ashley, if you can move to the next slide. So, once you sort of think about sort of your bigger goals, or maybe establish your SMART goals, it's sort of the digging into the nitty gritty of what are the steps and how are you going to accomplish those goals on an ongoing basis. And so that's why we like to transition to prioritizing your time. This is a topic that we talk to students about every day, probably in every meeting that we have with every student. So, as you start your journey in taking, classes this summer, really thinking about how you best want to approach managing your time. So Ashley, if you could move to the next slide. So we want to just provide, some general guidelines around the number of hours of study required per week when you're taking an online asynchronous class. And so thinking about the courses that you've registered for this summer, whether they're a 7-week course or a 15-week course, and kind of taking a look over to see, all right, what's the general principle and guideline around how much time I should probably target allocating to my studies. And we put this out there to just say, it's okay, right? If you need to start slow, I think sometimes jump in, we're really motivated and it's awesome. And you want to, register for 6 or 9 credits over a semester, and sort of depending on, the sessions that you're registered for, it could require a significant amount of time. So really thinking about all of the different things on your plate and making a sound assessment of how much you have available to dedicate to your courses. Actually, you could shift. So in thinking about your planning on a weekly basis, and we really do encourage students to think week by week, really about what you can and how you can allocate your time. So there are 168 hours in a week. Sounds like a lot, but big chunks of that really get eaten up fairly quickly when we start to think about, hopefully you're getting 8 hours of sleep every night, maybe you're working 40 hours in a job. And so suddenly time gets reduce pretty quickly. And so this hyperlink that's embedded in the PowerPoint, and we'll share this all out with you, links out to a time management calculator where you can do a quick assessment of all of the different areas of your life, how much time you spend during each day, and can give you a kind of a rough estimate of what's left with respect to the amount of time that you can devote to your studies. And so in thinking about the time that you have to allocate during the week, we encourage students to think about fixed obligations. Those are the things that you can't really shift a whole lot yourself. Those are your work hours. Those are required meetings and appointments. It might be commuting time, things that you really just have to allocate time to and plan on every day, every week. Then we have our health and wellness. We really want students to also prioritize sleep. We want to prioritize time to make meals, time to exercise, things that are required in order for you to function in your everyday life. And then beyond that, right, many of us also have other responsibilities, whether it be family obligations or even just, social time that's really important for us. So after you sort of identify all of this, what are the pockets of time that you can meaningfully allocate towards your academics? Shift to the next slide. So one of the metaphors we use with students is rocks, pebbles, and sand. So thinking first and foremost, as Nico talked about, our goals, right? Those are the rocks. Those are the really big meaningful activities that we have in our life. Pebbles are just our day-to-day routine, and then sand are sort of the other things that we get to add in that bring us joy. They also might be things that tend to be time sucks, our phones, social media, YouTube rabbit holes, all of those kinds of things that just sort of infiltrate and take valuable time on a day-to-day basis. So on the next slide, we have a visual representation of how this plays out. For many students that we have worked with, often we fill our cup first with a lot of those things that bring us, I don't know, they take a lot of our time, our social obligations, our TV shows, right? We fill our cup and it fills up pretty quickly with those. And so then there's limited amount of opportunity to devote to kind of our day-to-day routine. And then you can see often our goals, our larger aspirations kind of get the short shrift there. So just thinking about reprioritizing a bit and really focusing first and foremost on the activities that will move you towards your larger goals, then your day-to-day kind of responsibilities. And then there's still plenty of room. There's still plenty of time to devote to the things that really will fill your cup, so to speak. So as we focus on weekly planning, we do think that Sunday, so devoting time and building that into your schedule, so Sunday at the beginning of the week, if you work a different kind of schedule and maybe Tuesday is the beginning of your week for you, depending on sort of what it looks like, but dedicating some time and space on an ongoing basis to really establish a routine of determining what your week is going to look like. Not only does it help you establish kind of the workflow for the week, it helps you establish your priorities. It helps you to protect your time, to not allow a lot of other things to kind of creep in and take advantage of all those open pockets of time. And it also allows you to kind of check in on your goals, right? Like, am I making meaningful progress? Am I able to check things off my list that are moving me forward in a positive way? And there's a link on the bottom of the screen that will take you to a kind of a more in-depth resource around Sunday planning there. So going back to our friend Chris Bailey that we like so much, he says, when we schedule time for something, what we're actually doing is simply deciding when we will invest our attention and energy into the task. So as you shift forward to the next screen, Ashley, you can see that we are proponents of really using a hour-by-hour calendar to allocate time and to really clearly identify how you are going to use that time and where you're going to devote your time and attention. In a lot of ways, it's accountability check, but I also think for many of us, it really is a good tool for helping to prioritize and not lose sight of where our time goes. So this is one example. Pretty generic. For it might be a working professional, works 40 hours a week, traditional Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job at Boise State, for example. And so you can see our purple is where we've really built in a lot of those fixed obligations. And we like Google Calendar in a lot of ways because it allows us to quickly just repeat all of these obligations with a click of a button. So it easily populates your calendar for you. So on the next slide, we start to overlay the pockets of time that we will devote to our academics. And so for this individual student, you can see we've got 4, 6, 8, 10. So this is about 16 to 18 hours worth of study time that's sort of overlaid over our regular schedule. There's still ample opportunity for focusing on going to the gym, health and well-being, lots of free pockets of time for socialization or whatever fills your cup for you. But I think really intentionally allocating when you are going to accomplish, your academics is going to be a really important task to set up for yourself. On the next slide, so this is when things might get a little trickier. So this is an example that I've pulled from real life. A good friend of mine works a non-traditional schedule. She's a nurse. She works some weekends. She works shifts during the week that are not traditional. We've got kids incorporated into the mix here. You can see that there are, earlier wake-ups, potentially daycare drop-offs, prep for children falling at the end of the day. So the time tends to get a little bit tighter. And so really having to clearly identify the resources that you will need to tap into in order to allocate time to your studies. So there may be bigger blocks of time spent on the weekends after, you can't see it here, but it's actually after this 8 o'clock block is an 9 to 10:30 allocation for homework each night. So sort of just thinking about how you can work it in. And if you're not somebody who can stay up until 10:30 or 11 doing homework, acknowledging that about yourself and saying, when am I going to do this? Do I need to scale back some of my obligations in order to make it all happen? So encouraging you to do this exercise even before classes start for yourself. So in addition to just starting to lay out your week by week schedule, one of our key time management suggestions is at the start of the semester, really reviewing all of your course syllabi. You're going to look different from course to course, but spending some time really familiarizing yourself with what are the big picture items that I'm going to need to tackle over a 3-week session, a 7-week session, or a 15-week session, and laying those out in your calendar as well. Those large projects include those things I think that are the highest value items for most of us, the papers, the exams. And so we just don't want to get caught off guard by a lot of those things. So kind of giving yourself the lay of the land at the start of this semester. That will then inform your monthly planning and allow you to also inform your weekly planning. So we kind of call this the backwards planning process, right? Where you can start to identify those interim deadlines for yourself so that we can alleviate stress, we can accomplish what we want to accomplish, and sort of manage to integrate our academics, hopefully a little bit seamlessly, into the rest of our lives as well. So quick example of this. So ACAD 107 is an introductory class for success in an online learning environment offered by Extended Studies. So this is a true example of what you might see on a syllabus for this particular class. So you can see it laid out as these are all of the things you have to do in a given week. And I think for many students that can feel overwhelming to look at and figure out how am I going to accomplish all of this during the week when I have lots of competing priorities. So on the next slide, you can see how we've broken it down into prioritizing all of those tasks, spreading them out over the week, and doing this maybe on a Sunday. And so it really makes it a lot more accessible. You have a couple of things each day, identifying how much time you think those things are going to take, bolding some of those higher value items, the assignments that you need to turn in beyond maybe just reading a module or reading a chapter in a textbook. You can also see it does allow for time to take off from this particular course on a Wednesday and a Friday. So when you lay it out on a week by week basis, I think that it makes it very accessible. It allows you to identify where am I going to fit this in based on the time that's required for each of those items. And it does give you a really tangible task list to cross off on an ongoing basis. In our final two slides here around time management, we first want to present you with some of the apps that we do encourage students to use. As a Boise State student, the Google Suite is front and center for all of you. You have access to it right in your student center. We love Google Calendar. As you can see, the calendars we presented utilize Google Calendar. It allows you to share your calendar. So you might have, your Boise State calendar. You can share it with your family so they know what's going on in your life. You could share it maybe with a colleague if need be, your support system, whatever that looks like. So they have a sense of what's going on for you. It allows you to easily invite others within the Boise State network. If you're having a study group, you can easily invite somebody to join you and hop on Zoom to do that. So we love Google Calendar. And Google Tasks appears right on your calendar. You can actually create tasks and have them populate in certain times on your calendar as well. So there's a really nice integration there. And then beyond that, there's lots of other apps, many free apps you can carry on your phone, your tablet, your laptop that all, work to support time management. All that we say here is find something that works best for you. Play with a few of them and identify how you can be most successful. We also don't recommend using all of these. We don't want to have lots of things spread across many different apps. So identifying one or two that are going to be consistent for you and work for your particular learning and organization style. Okay. And then we'll leave you with this final quote here. True self-care is not about bath bombs and chocolate cake. It's about making the choice to not build a life you need to regularly escape from. And I think it really goes back to what I presented at the beginning of, it's okay to start slow. It's okay to figure out what's going to work for you to cultivate a level of balance so that you can feel successful in your courses. And so really wanting to eliminate opportunities for overwhelm, for stress, for anxiety, and just creating a schedule for yourself that you can maintain over the long haul. With that, I will now transition, I think, back to Nico to talk about some tips for staying organized and connected.
Perfect, thank you. All right, if we can move on to the next slide, please. Perfect. All right, so one of the things that we definitely encourage, and this is kind of like our roles as advisors, is stay in touch with your network of support. And that's going to look very different to each of you. But there's probably going to be a few people that we can identify that are going to be very important in your education. First of all, the faculty. You're going to be meeting a lot of instructors, and they should always kind of be that first and best resource because they know the class in detail, they know how flexible they can be at specific points in the semester, and they can guide you based on the things that you may be experiencing, especially if it is maybe issues comprehending the material, or maybe things happening in your personal life that are distracting you from actually engaging the course fully. Even though you may be taking classes online, the instructor is still a good resource, and they're still going to be available to you, whether that's through email, making appointments, office hours, and so on. So don't think that an online experience means that you are in an island and you have to do everything by yourself. There's a lot of support around it as well. All of you will have some very capable advisors that can give you a sense of both the program, but also make sure that you're taking the classes in the right order. Make sure that you don't run into any issues down the line that could potentially, cause larger problems as you progress. So being in constant communication with your advisor, at the very least, maybe once a semester, is a really good habit to get into. And then identify who are going to be the other people in your circle, in your life that can support you. That could be family, friends, potentially a pet, but establishing those boundaries. What do you need from them? And what do you need to let them know? Maybe just asking them for some quiet time if that's possible, and you have a hectic house. Maybe it's asking a friend to check in on you and see how you did on your midterm. So establishing those boundaries play a pretty big role when it comes to receiving the correct support. Thank you, Ashley. So developing a plan, again, we're talking a lot about prep. We talk about identifying your goals and prepping before the semester starts. We talk about identifying your time commitments before the semester starts. And I will talk about developing that plan before the semester starts. Making sure that you know all the details that come with being in school. One thing that a lot of people don't think about is identifying a space that is going to be good for your learning experience. For some of you, that might be the kitchen table. Some of you might be the living room couch. Some of you might just see how to leave your house and go to a coffee shop or a park or somewhere to do the work that you need. But just be mindful and identify a space that is going to work for you. Some of you may like something ultra quiet, that way you can concentrate. Other ones like maybe some background noise. But know what's going to be the environment that will work for you, and what are going to be those distractions that might take you away from school if they were to happen. Now, with all of us being adults and having very different lives, that could be very easy or very challenging. But again, recognizing what those factors are play a pretty significant role as well. All right, and then I'll hand it over to Matt to talk about some academic tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nico. And thank you all for your time. I'm going to talk a bit more about some of the resources that are available to you as online students at Boise State, and maybe touch on a couple of apps that we would recommend in terms of staying organized and potentially some of those time management things that we talked about already today. So with that, I'll start by saying we are all in this room. So the folks that are professionals in this room are all a resource for you. And at the Advising and Academic Support Center specifically, if you have questions about support options, particularly say like a tutoring or discipline specific help, at Boise State, mostly those services are department run. So we help connect students where they need to go. And I just want to say first and foremost that we're here as a resource for you. So please feel free to reach out if you're having trouble connecting with any of the services that we're going to talk about. That said, Ashley, you can hit on to the next slide. So one of the, again, we love Google around here. As you can see, we've promoted a few different Google applications, but one of them that's extremely important, and I think you'll see used widely in your online courses, is Google Drive. So Drive is associated with that Google suite that we run at Boise State and can be a place where you can organize all of your student files. They have several different applications within it to create forms, presentations, work collaboratively on documents. And so those are going to be extremely helpful when you're working online and specifically can't get in touch or work with students together in an in-person setting, right? So in many of your classes, you may notice that we'll use, say, Google Docs, if you're familiar with that, and you can edit simultaneously together as a team, right? So those are a few options that are available there. Ashley, thank you for sending that link. And it's just something to be aware of. There's a couple of different links that we have in the presentation here that we can share. One of them is just our general Drive support link. So Google has their help page available. Then we also have Boise State put together a nice FAQ and some options for Google Drive as well. But know that this has unlimited storage, it updates regularly and is saving constantly, right? So anytime you make your last edit, it's going to auto save for you. No longer do we have to live in the days of saving the wrong version, which I'm sure has happened to all of us at least once or twice in this room. It can be really frustrating. So Google Drive is extremely helpful in that way, right? And on top of that, you can go back and look and view the history of all of your edits in any document or presentation. So if you did remove something, you go back and find it, right? So there's a couple of ways that it can be helpful, but in terms of organization, you can organize all of your assignments, especially papers, spreadsheets, things of that nature in this particular app. And it's one that we heavily recommend in staying organized. Okay. Next, I just want to introduce a few of the academic resources that are available to you. We had already talked a little bit about ACAD 107. For those of you that are part of the online degree program, you'd likely have taken that course or will be taking that class as part of the degree program. However, if it's not a requirement, know that it's a great resource to reestablish maybe some habits online, or just get reconnected with what online learning looks like right now, right? So if it's been a minute and you haven't engaged in any online courses, this is a really great way to establish expectations, what it's going to look like from Boise State's perspective in terms of your learning management system. So it's something I'll get to here in a minute, but and just good study habits and ways to approach your online classes to be successful. So I really highly recommend that. If it's not required for you, it's still a great option as an elective. Another resource that we have available through our office, and I'll name a few here. One is academic coaching. So we do this remotely as of now, but hopefully in the future we can get back to doing this in person. But academic coaching is a one-on-one service that we provide. And in fact, all of the folks that have spoken today are academic coaches. And essentially what we do is work through some of this planning with you. So we talked about goal setting today. We talked a lot about time management today, and using some of these tools and implementing them in your experience as a student. An academic coach would sit down with you, talk more about what your goals are, right? Establish that relationship. And then we meet with you regularly throughout the semester to check in on how things are going, right? So with that, you establish some goals up front. We walk you through that process. And then we might introduce a few new tools or talk about ways that you're going to approach these goals and check in with you on a regular basis on how that's going. And by regular, that can mean anywhere from, every other week. Sometimes we meet with students monthly, but it's a chance to sit down with a pro and have that coaching relationship and know that you're getting that support. So that's available to all students. It's a free service, and it's an hour of one-on-one time each session with a professional coach. So know that that's available if you're looking for that next level of support individually. And you can book online through our website with a coach and meet over Zoom or over the phone. So there's several different ways to do that. We also have a few other independent skill building options. So within this realm of, on our slide, we talk about just reading and note-taking in college, test taking and preparing for, essays and academic writing. These are all foundational skills of college students. And whether you've had this experience prior or are coming back to it, these are the things often that maybe one or two of them you're looking to build up some more skills in, or build up your expertise in. And we have lots of options for that. So one of them is our online student workshops. We have several that are focused in these areas, among others. And those are through a service called Student Lingo. So those are available to all students. Again, these are all free resources. And we'll take you through anywhere from 15 to 30-minute virtual workshop that's step-by-step and introduces different tools and has some knowledge checks throughout, right? Some comprehension checks throughout built in. I highly recommend those if you're looking for a small piece of time that's, again, individually driven, student-led. That's a really good option. Outside of that, in tandem, say with coaching, those are two of those skill building options that are available. As far as tutoring is concerned on campus, COVID has really presented some great options, frankly. So as a result of having to move online in many instances with our in-person services, there's been quite a shift in access. So along with online tutoring that we provide through something called Tutor Matching Service, We also have several online Zoom options that are available through campus. So I'd really highly suggest if there's a course that you might be having some trouble with, or you're needing some discipline specific support, check out the link that Ashley sent. That's a pretty detailed list, I believe. Let me make sure that that's the correct. Support services. Yeah, so on that particular academic support services page, there's a link that says learning assistant and tutoring services, right, on campus. And that will take you to a complete listing of tutoring that's available at Boise State. Many of those, if not all of them, are operating with an online version right now. So know that there's multiple resources available to you right now. I anticipate that staying fairly status quo throughout the fall semester as well. So know that those, and I don't see that going away either. So we have more breadth of options available to online students now than we had before, and that's a good thing. Again, if you have any trouble accessing these resources, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you get connected to that. One in particular that I want to highlight is our Writing Center. They are a well-established program that gives feedback to students on any of their writing assignments. And we're talking from 100 level all the way through graduate work. You can submit either an asynchronous version of that. So you might submit a paper and they can send that back to you with some feedback. Know that this isn't going to focus on grammar. So they're not going to go back through and correct all of your grammar. It's more about the content of the paper, giving some feedback on that and how you might adjust a few things to make it better, right? So they have undergraduate consultants that are available to all students, do a great job of training them. So I highly encourage that service. A couple other links there that I want you to be aware of. As an institution, we're moving from Blackboard to a new learning management system called Canvas. And for some of you, Ashley, will you remind me of which programs will be in Canvas this summer? There was a list of a few.
There's a few. So the social work program will be partially in Canvas and partially in Blackboard. So if you're in the social work program, be aware that some of your classes may be in different learning management systems. Your instructors will help guide you and your program coordinator will help guide you. We also have the respiratory care program, genetic counseling program, and the public health program that are all moving to Canvas this summer.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate that. So we intend, as a university, we intend to make that full transition next academic year. It sounds like for most of us that will happen in the fall. So you'll see, if you're familiar with Boise State, you've probably seen Blackboard as the main learning management system. And by that, it's basically where all communication and modules are set up for the course, right? So that's online courses where you'll find all of your course materials, the syllabus. Your instructor will be communicating with you through that platform. You'll be able to see your grades and assignments there, right? So that's what I mean by learning management system, or LMS. So it'll look slightly different if you're taking courses in Canvas from, well, it'll look different, not slightly, from Blackboard and Canvas, right? We have help guides for those that are available, and I'm sure that our Office of Information and Tech will be able to help you as well if you need some help with that. And then lastly, our Educational Access Center. So this is where students that may need additional accommodations for a learning difference can work with a pro to work out what that might look like for you to make sure that your education here is completely accessible, right? So that might look like different note-taking software or a few other options that are available for students. So that's not an exhaustive list, however, ones that come up for us quite often in what we would recommend to students and that's available to you. Let's head on to our last slide here. There we go. So just a few other applications that might be particularly helpful. These are that we recommend to all students, but might be particularly helpful for your online experience. A few are organizational. specifically EndNote and Evernote are very helpful in terms of online note taking and reference building, right? So if you're writing a large research paper or are looking to put together a bibliography, this is a great, EndNote is a fabulous resource. Evernote is another one where you can keep notes virtually, annotate everything from different types of documents. So that's really helpful. One that comes up for me, let's see. I believe it is free. Is that true? I'm sorry. So I just got a question from Mark. Grammarly is free for Boise State students. I want to make sure that I'm correctly stating that is a true statement.
My experience has been, Nico, you might be able to chime in based on Emmy's experience. My experience has been there's like a free version, which does a pretty good job. And then there's kind of a premium that does more like
a really good job.
Yeah, if you know you're prone to the passive voice or have some complicated grammatical challenges, maybe the premium version. There's a free version that does a really good job, I think, with general grammar issues.
Mark, that's a really good question in terms of the full version. I'm not sure. We might have to get back to you on that and what's available to students. I think what we were looking at was the free version that's available to everybody. There may be access to that. However, I'm not aware of it in terms of that full premium version. Others that are helpful. So a few that we want to point out specifically from our friends at the Educational Access Center. So Dragon is a dictation software, so translate written into verbal, right? And same for CAPTI, right? So those are very helpful. I will say that Dragon is not free. And actually can be quite expensive depending on the version that you have there, but one that can be helpful. So a last one that I want to point out from this particular list that's helpful for all of us procrastinators is Cold Turkey. So speaking of the sand, right, that we talked about earlier, some of those easy fillers where we might get lost in a YouTube or Facebook hole. Cold Turkey can be set up to block specific sites for specific amounts of time or during a particular schedule if you want. So it's very helpful in keeping you on task if that's something that tends to be a problem for you. So again, these are all sort of built in on the front end, right, to make you more helpful or at least more productive in the long term. So these are just a few that we recommend, but wanted to lay that out as some resources for you in terms of studying and things that will be helpful for your student experience online. So that said, here we are at the end, and Nico, I'll let you wrap us up here.
Thanks, Matt. I was just going to add a couple of things, if you don't mind. I was going to say that in terms of Grammarly, it's not part of one of the Boise State apps. You can get it on your own, but it's not part of the combination. I know that the pro version, they even provides like a readability score. So making sure that you're using the same pronouns throughout the paper, things along those lines. But the free version, again, especially for simple grammar mistakes, it works wonderful. And also in terms of Dragon, we do have a couple of computers on campus at the library that is already installed, so you can use it there, but I understand that might not be an option for a lot of you. But if you're looking for dictation software, that's probably one of the better ones, but there's some options available for that as well. In terms of wrapping up, I think that we cover a lot of different information, but ultimately what we're trying to share or at least get across is that identifying what's going to be work best for you. Maybe apps are not for you, and that's fine, but then what else can you put into place into your education that can take its place? And then a lot of the things that we encourage you are just those practices that can hopefully become routines as you continue them through multiple semesters and you finish your degree as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Nico. So Ashley, if you wouldn't mind going to our next slide here. This is some contact information for a lot of the folks that you heard from today. So all of us here certainly are willing to help you out in terms of connecting with resources. And as I said, with academic coaching, we can sit down and put together a student-driven plan is what we call it here, but largely those are goals set by you, and we facilitate that process and then work with you to develop some of those tools to help you reach those goals. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and we have a few minutes here, so I want to make sure that we open it up for questions. Are there any questions that we have from the group?
Matt, hey, Anna Trio,
Hi.
nice to see you again.
Yeah.
I joined a little late. Sorry, I was mismanaging my time. I wondered if
Okay.
besides the recording of the meeting, if this PowerPoint and just some of the wonderful slides that you showed could be made available. We do a lot of intensive coaching, advising, et cetera, in Trio, and you've done such a nice job. I don't want to reinvent the wheel if I don't have to. And it looks really nice. We have a new class this year as well. So maybe incorporating some of this directly into the class and making sure, all these just little touch points are clear to students would be great. I don't even know if there are any students on this call. It looks like all advisors. I don't know, Mark, I don't know you, but I know everyone else and kind of. And so I think, from the perspective of providing information, providing access, providing, touch points, contact points, all this is really helpful. And I just wondered about the slides.
Oh, absolutely. I think I can speak for this group and say that we'd be happy to share those. And there's lots of good links that are built in. We'd also be happy to come talk with those groups as well. So whatever works best for you. Certainly, I know that we'd be happy to collaborate and come to your classroom if that's something that's helpful. Or speak with your staff. Yeah, whichever works best.
Yeah, yep. we're actually having in-person classes if things continue the way they seem to be going. So we'll have an in-person class. It'd be nice. I think a lot of our students have not done as well online. So
sure. Yeah, no problem.
Looks like it's one question from Mark. Oh, sorry, Nico, didn't mean to.
I was going to say that. It's like I was going to address Mark's question that you can connect with us when you connect with Sarah. We're not territorial by any means. You can definitely work with multiple people at the same time. I would say that probably Sarah is a much better resource for like major specific questions. I think that she does a lot of like the radiological sciences or imaging sciences, but that I know nothing about. So, but in terms of academic coaching, academic support, that's probably going to be an area that we can support you as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I just shared the slide deck with you. So
Lindsay, that's what I thought you were doing, and I didn't want to call you out if you weren't doing that. So I wanted to say it'll be in your email in 2 seconds. It looks like Lindsay's working on that. Any other questions? Okay. Well, again, we certainly appreciate your time. Ashley, if there's any last thoughts from online programs, the floor is yours.
Nothing specific, but I just wanted to say thank you all for taking the time to join us. Like Matt said, we know how much of a time commitment this is. Mark, I can see you're at work right now, so thank you so much for joining us on the clock. I hope that this was really helpful. We will make sure that we send the recording out to you all, so you will get a copy of the recording and then any relevant materials. It does typically take us a few days to get it all converted. We like to convert it to YouTube and add captions and things like that. So look for that early to mid next week, and I'll make sure that you all have that resource available to you so that you can use this material over and over again and use those handy links that they've embedded into the PowerPoint. So the other thing I wanted to say is thank you so very much to our AASC team. They always do a wonderful job each semester. So I just want to honor you and say thank you for all of the work and for all of the great advice that you've shared today. If there are no more questions, I'll let you all go.
Thank
Have
you
a
all.
wonderful
you.
day.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. We'll see you.
Thank you.